Hi, I'm Mark Cuban, and I'm about to give you some advice on how to be just a little bit richer than you are today.
Yeah, just make sure you're not on the other side of him, especially once he starts taking credit.
So effectively, me and my buddy from college, Todd Wagner, started the streaming industry.
What?
And there it was. I'm sitting like basically naked on this chair, hitting this thing, going boom, 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 until it hit it, bounced around, did my little Billionaire dance song.
That's insane.
It was insane, man.
Well, at least that part's probably not a lie. Cuban did become a billionaire chasing those 3 commas.
I'm just competitive, and I like being involved in businesses where you're kicking ass, you know?
He sure does, and this is the story of how he kicked a true founder's ass to the curb.
Oh!
When Mark Cuban was just 16 years old, a newspaper strike shut down deliveries in Pittsburgh. So he drove to Cleveland, bought newspapers there, then drove them back, marked them up, and sold them at 5 times the price. And in college, he flipped anything he could. Garbage bags, stamps, bar promotions, whatever turned a quick profit. He ran a chain letter style operation where money cycling in from new participants paid earlier ones. That's right, he ran a Ponzi scheme. You see, Cuban wasn't a kid dreaming about building products that changed the world like Steve Jobs. He wasn't building new business models like Sam Walton. He wasn't creating new industries like Jeff Bezos. He was learning how to sell, maybe lie a little, and close. Cuban once joked that he'd mark up software he got for free, then resell it at a profit. He'd even register fake business names to get early access to products before competitors. Then he started Micro Solutions, a computer integration business, basically wiring offices, installing software, fixing problems other companies didn't want to deal with. In 1990, he sold Micro Solutions to CompuServe for $6 million. After taxes, he walked away with $3 million. In business, the loudest person in the room usually gets the attention. The one who actually did the work, they're lucky if they get a Wikipedia mention. Say hello to Cameron Chris Jabe. Back in 1989, Jabe started a company called Cameron Audio Networks. He had an innovative idea for the time, broadcasting live audio over the internet. But this was the early 90s, and the internet wasn't ready for something like that. Instead, listeners dialed into 1-900 numbers on closed systems. But Jabe, he worked hard, buying servers, paying for them out of pocket, cold calling radio stations non-stop, up to 100 times a day, figuring out the logistics of streaming when the rest of the world was still figuring out email. By June of 1994, he was working on a system he called Radio on Internet. He even landed the holy grail of sports rights, a deal with Teamline, which controlled the broadcasts for nearly 70% of major US sports teams. The deal was simple. Jabe pays $50,000, Teamline lets him bring those broadcasts online. And soon, Todd Wagner introduced Jabe to his old college roommate, Mark Cuban. They weren't tech visionaries, they were business hustlers. November 1994, California Pizza Kitchen. Jabe meets with Cuban and Wagner, and then gets ready to pitch an investment opportunity into his company.
I'd given to maybe 150 people over the previous year and a half to 2 years. And so I'm getting into my pitch. It's usually about a 20-minute pitch, and within 3 minutes he goes, I'm in, I'll do it.
In that meeting, Jabe asks for $1 million to invest in his company. But instead, Cuban writes him a check for $10,000. And on the bottom of the check, he scribbles 2% of the company. He doesn't even negotiate this with Jabe, he just writes it in and expects him to comply. Now Jabe, he's not a shark. He's a laid-back tech innovator who just wants to build out his company. He just shrugs his shoulders and accepts the offer. But that's not all. Cuban insists his shares of the company be non-dilutable. It meant that no matter how much more money was raised or how much more work other people put in, Cuban's slice of the pie always stayed exactly the same. Chris Jabe's slice though? Well, not exactly. More on that later. Jabe told people he was still trying to figure out the technology itself, something that could eventually behave like a real streaming player. But just weeks later, Teamline reneges on the deal with Jabe. Why? Microsoft stepped in, that's why. Teamline tells Jabe, you guys are unknown, we're going with Microsoft. Jabe sues, blocking Microsoft from using those rights online, at least temporarily. And this is when Mark Cuban lost interest. He told Jabe he didn't really have anything worth much. But something would soon launch that would change everything. April 3rd, 1995. Progressive Networks launches Real Audio Player, the first true media player capable of streaming over the open internet. The streaming problem Jabe had been grinding on for years, solved by someone else. Cuban seized the Real Audio tech and was back in with a vengeance. He renamed the company AudioNet in September of '95, and the story shifted fast.
So effectively, me and my buddy from college, Todd Wagner, started the streaming industry. One day there was not streaming, the next day there was. One day we're having lunch at California Pizza Kitchen, and I'm like, you know what? My last business was networking, local and wide area networks, connecting PCs together. Let me see if I can figure this out. So we started a company called AudioNet.
Notice anything missing from his story? No mention of the real founder who spent half a decade cold calling radio stations, securing crucial broadcasting rights, and developing the necessary relationships. Oh, and he conveniently forgets the fact that Real Audio Player launched streaming 5 months before he did. But why let a few facts get in the way of a good origin story, am I right? The actual code that allowed audio to travel over a modem was created by Real Networks. Even the Wall Street Journal pointed out that Cuban and Wagner essentially just learned about the existing software and decided to use it. Real Player solved how to stream, Jabe solved what to stream and who would let you stream it. And Cuban, well, he solved how to take credit for both. And soon, he tried to push Jabe out of his own company.
Mark said, Chris, I really don't need you. You really don't have that much to add. I can pretty much do or get people to do what you're doing. So I was a little bummed, to say the least.
So while Cuban tried to kick Jabe out of his own company, Todd Wagner actually came in with a different job offer for Jabe. He convinced him to accept an offer that let him own 10% of the company and get a monthly salary of $2,500 for part-time work.
Even though it was hard to take 10% of a company that I developed 100% from scratch.
Jabe was now a part-time employee in the company he founded. And in 1998, Cuban rebranded the company as Broadcast.com. The name wasn't accidental. AudioNet sounded small, just focused on audio. Broadcast, well, that was the future. Radio, television, the internet, all rolled into one. They promised users sports radio, business news, live events, right from their computers. The experience was, well, it was rough. To hear anything, you had to leave the site, download Real Player from somewhere else, install it, and hope it didn't crash your browser. On a 56K modem, streaming often meant 5 seconds of audio or video, followed by about 30 seconds of buffering. The streams lagged, the tech barely held together, and Broadcast.com didn't even own the player. They were basically just the middleman, piping radio signals into someone else's software. But none of that really mattered, because this was 1998. By rebranding and going public at the peak of the dot-com bubble, Cuban didn't need the product to work well. He just needed to get lucky on timing. July 17th, 1998. Broadcast.com goes public. The stock quadruples on day one.
It was the IPO heard round the world, a stock that shot up 249% on its first day of trading last week, breaking records, creating instant fortunes, and leaving the rest of us asking, why didn't I buy that?
The best first day IPO performance in US history at the time, over $1 billion, earning Cuban and Wagner hundreds of millions. But for Jabe, you'd think 10% of a $1 billion company means you just made $100 million, right? Well, not quite. You see, Cuban and Wagner worked out the deal with Jabe. Cuban's 2% was non-dilutable. Jabe's 10% was not. Every time Cuban and Wagner raised more money, Jabe's slice got smaller and smaller, until his 10% stake diluted down to less than 1%. Ruthless. Within 9 months, the company had over 500,000 users and hosted the first major webcast in history, the Victoria's Secret fashion show. But not everything was as perky. The stream was a technical disaster. The tech simply couldn't handle the load. And financially, Broadcast.com was losing money. A lot of money. $116 million in losses against just $22 million in revenue. But that didn't matter, because the internet in 1999 wasn't a tech market. It was a hype market. A time when you could add .com to a company name and investors would throw money at it.
Internet stocks drove a powerful surge on Wall Street today. The Dow.
At the heart of it was the mad scramble by bankers and venture capitalists to take hundreds of unprofitable young internet companies public.
But I think the long-term opportunity really is to be the customer interface to your doorstep.
Some say the internet is so revolutionary that the usual rules for valuing a stock, such as revenues and earnings, no longer apply.
And this was a perfect environment for a guy like Mark Cuban to make his money. He took borrowed technology and started looking for someone with enough money and enough FOMO to buy the whole thing before the world realized the product was terrible. And soon, he'd find his mark. April 1st, 1999. Yahoo agrees to purchase Broadcast.com for $5.7 billion in Yahoo stock. Unfortunately for Yahoo, this wasn't an April Fool's prank. $5.7 billion. For a company that had nothing proprietary, little working tech, and no future product roadmap. This was Yahoo's biggest acquisition. And remember, this was 1999. Google wasn't a verb yet. If you searched the internet, you used Yahoo. And Yahoo didn't want to be a place where you just searched. They wanted to be a media empire. News, sports, finance, and video. Like everyone else caught in the dot-com bubble, they didn't need profits. They needed vibes, which made them the perfect buyer for someone who knew how to sell a story bigger than the product. Broadcast.com was burning money and had never turned a profit. It didn't even own the technology behind streaming. Broadcast.com relied on RealPlayer to deliver the audio and rented bandwidth just to function. In reality, it wasn't a true streaming platform at all. It was just a middleman. But Cuban didn't sell the tech, he sold the hype around it. It was, objectively, one of the worst deals of the dot-com bubble. And Chris Jabe, well, his shares got diluted down to less than 1% by the time of the Yahoo sale. In the end, he walked away with around $50 million. Jabe would eventually leave tech, move to Hawaii, and focus on sustainability, starting a couple of non-profit organizations focused on food and health education.
That's what drew us here, is the beauty and the nature. The natural environment is amazing here.
Just a really chill guy. Cuban understood what Yahoo didn't. The market was a game of musical chairs and he wasn't about to be left without a seat. As the ink dried on that deal, Cuban didn't double down on the future of media that he just sold. Instead, he quietly executed a collar trade, a sophisticated hedge that locked in his money. Now a cynic might say Cuban knew what he sold Yahoo was worthless. Others will say it was just risk management. Either way, he got lucky with timing, because only months later, the dot-com bubble burst.
This closing bell might as well have been an alarm, so savage was the selling.
As Yahoo's stock crashed, Cuban hit the sell button the moment his lockup ended, and he walked away with $1.4 billion, officially going from millionaire to billionaire. A masterclass in selling high, getting out clean, and letting someone else eat the loss. January 4th, 2000. Once Cuban entered the 3 Comma Club, he used that money to purchase the Dallas Mavericks for $285 million.
Now that it's happened, just like Broadcast.com and other businesses before that, it's time to go to work and it's time to really focus on doing the things I need to do.
To his credit, Cuban did get to work. He turned the Mavericks into a serious NBA franchise, improved facilities, he spent money on players, he really changed the culture. As owner of the Dallas Mavericks, he portrayed himself as just another loudmouth fan who just happened to be the billionaire owner. Wearing t-shirt and jeans, courtside, screaming at refs, a billionaire who seemed anti-establishment. Eventually, it led to an NBA championship 11 years later. And Cuban, he sure loves being seen with that trophy. You'd think he was the one on the floor with Dirk. So yeah, just like Broadcast.com, it was a huge win. For him. Not so much for Yahoo though. They tried to integrate Broadcast.com, but it was obsolete tech that couldn't scale. Within 2 years, Yahoo took the tech he sold them and threw it in the trash. Broadcast.com faded into oblivion. But not Mark Cuban. He was on TV telling everyone how smart he was.
All the streaming, everything YouTube does, we started that.
You started that?
It was called AudioNet and we started in 1995.
Liar!
By 2011, Cuban is on Shark Tank, and the Yahoo deal fades from memory. Now he was the relatable billionaire who dropped gems like,
If you put your mind to it, anything is possible.
sure, if you're willing to hijack a business, erase a founder, sell borrowed technology at the peak of a once-in-a-lifetime bubble, and dupe a tech giant, then yes, anything is possible.
Well, first of all, you have the presumption that people care what you say. They don't.
Yeah, maybe. I'm just a lowly YouTuber. But hopefully a few people will care enough to click subscribe below. But there were other people who did care, enough to launch an investigation. Enter the SEC.
Securities and Exchange Commission says Cuban committed fraud in 2004 after investing in a small internet search company called Mama.com. The SEC says Cuban sold his entire stake in the company, 600,000 shares, after learning the company's CEO was planning an offering of new stock. By selling when he did, the SEC says Cuban avoided losses in excess of $750,000.
Now for most billionaires, you pay the fine, sign a settlement, and then go back to your yacht. But Cuban spent a lifetime painting himself as a scrappy but lucky, self-made billionaire, man of the people. Being outed as just another greedy elitist who cheated the system would damage the brand he built. So he spent more on lawyers than the fine would have cost him, about $12 million. He made it about the little guy fighting back against government overreach. Except the little guy here was a billionaire. In the end, a jury in Dallas cleared him. Years later, Cuban backed a cash advance fintech company called Dave, promising fast money to people living paycheck to paycheck. Yeah, well, that company would later be sued by the FTC over allegedly defrauding those customers. And then there was Voyager Digital, a crypto platform Cuban promoted to millions of fans. He even called it as close to risk-free as you're going to get.
Fans who download the app, create an account using the promotional code MAVS100, deposit $100 and make a trade, will get $100 in crypto.
In 2022, Voyager went bankrupt, freezing $1.3 billion in assets. 3.5 million people locked out of their money overnight. A $3 billion class action lawsuit followed. Cuban and others were sued amid allegations that Voyager operated like a Ponzi scheme. Which, you know, is interesting, considering this wasn't the first time Cuban and allegations of a Ponzi scheme would be in the same sentence. Well, I guess what you learn in college does prepare you for life. Anyways, in December of 2025, the case ended up being dismissed. Once again, Cuban walked away clean.
Somebody has got to be the luckiest person in the world. Somebody's got to be, right?
It's you.
And I'm just glad it's me.
In interviews, Cuban, and by the way, he loves doing interviews, Cuban will joke about the Yahoo deal. He'll paint himself as a business tech leader.
I've just learned what I'm good at and learned to focus on those things. And
irony, anyone? Anyone see the irony here? But to this day, he refuses to give credit to Chris Jabe. Because again, that would go against the brand he built of himself.
He never really wanted to acknowledge me as a founder.
Won't want to be ya.
Most people don't know that Cuban had sold vaporware at a historic markup. Because the truth is, Cuban's empire was built on lies and luck.
I did all the technology, and then we hired engineer after engineer after engineer to implement it.
I did all the technology, and I did all the technology, and I did all the technology.
I mean, what actual person in tech says something like that?
He's an idiot. He's a con artist.
No, Cuban didn't invent streaming or even technology that really worked. He sold belief. The maverick, the straight-talking billionaire, the TV shark, the guy who says he's just like you, the relatable guy. And people bought it because the most valuable product Mark Cuban ever sold wasn't technology or a service. It was himself. Now, is that too harsh?
Nobody wants to hear what you have to say.
Well, I do, so let me know in the comments.